I'll dance with you.
You cannot really call Frank-Castle a hero, as a hero is someone with an ethical code. A hero fights against the bad guys, captures them, and brings them to justice. So if all these qualities make someone a hero, Frank-Castle cannot be put into the same category. Frank has lost his belief in systemic justice, so he no longer has a moral code that abides by the system. If he has one, it is to kill people who have done wrong, and there's no in between. The strangest thing, however, is that despite his stance against the system, Frank, aka the Punisher, is one of the most beloved crusaders from Marvel Comics. Even the very people within this system sometimes idolize him, which is scary. Anyway, in today's video I'm going to take a deep dive into the Punisher's origin and his entire anatomy to see what exactly made him this way. So stay with me till the end of this video, and let's get started. Who was Frank-Castle before he became the Punisher? According to the classic comics, Frank-Castle's tragic life story shaped him into a killer, but later retcons reinterpreted his childhood in a darker way. Born in Queens, New York, Frank was initially called Frank Castiglione. Coming from a Sicilian background, his family later shortened the surname to fit into American society, but Frank was made of different metal altogether. He didn't even want to be a perfect fit for this society, as he had hated it since childhood. His first kill happened when he was just 10 years old. After witnessing a local gangster kill an innocent couple, Frank was genuinely disturbed, which altered his perception of morality. Realizing that people could take others' lives just for fun disgusted him, so he made homemade napalm and poured it on the gangster, burning him to death. Well, that was just the beginning. In high school, his closest friend Stedman Sternberger, whom Frank used to defend from bullies, died after a drunken joyride ended in a car crash. The driver and passengers fled, leaving the kid on the road to die. It didn't sit well with Frank, as he lost his innocent friend to a bunch of irresponsible people. The sense of revenge began to take form in his mind, so he tracked down those responsible and finished them off. During this time, at a hockey game, he first met his future wife, Maria Falconio, who was perhaps the only person to give him some stability in life. However, the peace of family life was snatched away from him when, in Central Park, his wife, son Frank Jr., and daughter Lisa witnessed a mob execution and were shot to eliminate them as witnesses. Frank survived, but life had already become a punishment for him. So yes, Frank had been disturbed since childhood, but surely the death of his family was a trigger point after which he no longer held himself back. Is he superhuman, or is this just what peak human looks like? Frank-Castle has no superpowers, only the most extraordinary human abilities. He joined the U.S. Marine Corps, where under the guidance of a Native American scout named Fawn Bighawk, he learned intense fighting and survival skills. He rose to become a sniper with the ability to shoot fast-moving targets at great distances. In the early comics, he served in the Vietnam War, which was later retconned into the fictional Seoncog War to keep his age consistent. His methods were questionable and extremely dangerous, so he was sent on the most dangerous missions, where the chance of survival was really low. But no matter what the situation was, he would always survive thanks to his skills. He has extraordinary skills in various forms of martial arts like Nashiryu Jiu-Jitsu, Sistema, Muay Thai, and CQC. Literally ambidextrous, Frank knows how to use all kinds of weapons, from ballistic weapons to heavy artillery. He's an expert pilot who knows how to operate both choppers and specific wartime aircraft. He also speaks many foreign languages pretty fluently, like Italian, Spanish, French, and Kurdish. But above all, the most interesting thing about him is his high tolerance for pain. He is also a skilled medic who can perform surgery on himself in the middle of a fight. You can see him literally training his body to accept pain as a natural thing. Due to this high durability, if he decides to get into a fight, it's extremely hard for his enemies to beat him down. Frank-Castle can be their absolute nightmare.
Punisher.
Why does a skull mean so much to this guy? The white skull logo is the ultimate emblem of the Punisher. If Frank-Castle is seen in his iconic black vest with this large white skull painted on his chest, you must know that somebody is going to die. The comic writer Jerry Conway introduced him in The Amazing Spider-Man number 129, published in 1974. But at that time, he had no idea that the logo would make its own mark on Marvel fandom. Back then, the logo was simply a symbol of death, since it is death that shaped Frank into who he is. Moreover, the logo also depicts his method of merciless killing and his disgust with the legal system. Wearing this logo means he has lost his trust in law enforcement. However, the logo has many other purposes as well, which were later developed even further in the comics. Frank wears it mostly to draw the attention of his enemies, who target his body without knowing that his chest is heavily armored. This way he can protect his limbs and his unprotected head. Also, the skull is a symbol of fear, the fear of death. In a dark room, if Frank confronts his enemy, the stark white symbol on the black suit looks like a nightmare, slowly approaching them. But anyway, the skull made a lot of ruckus in the fan world, especially among military personnel, who stenciled the iconic symbol on their helmets and weapons to show toughness and protection. But that's where they got it wrong. Jerry Conway didn't like the police or military arbitrarily using the symbol because law enforcement institutions that have vowed to protect citizens lawfully aren't supposed to wear the emblem. Rather, it can be used as an icon of protest. Jerry asked fans to use skulls for justice for moments like anti-police brutality protests and Black Lives Matter. In one comic issue, The Punisher, Volume 12, Number 13, Frank-Castle tore the symbol off a police vehicle saying, "I'll say this once, we're not the same. You took an oath to uphold the law. You help people. I gave all that up a long time ago. You don't do what I do. Nobody does." What's actually in Frank-Castle's war chest? Whenever we see Frank-Castle on his way to hunt down his enemies, we see him well prepared and well equipped with his arsenal of weapons. But do you know that some of them are his own DIY stuff? Yes, the man is not just a skilled warrior, but a genius tactician who knows exactly how to kill a man with precise ruthlessness. Castle is more comfortable with conventional firearms than with high-energy weapons. So let's take a quick look at his weapons. First of all, you cannot imagine Frank-Castle without his firearms, like heavy-caliber sidearms, high-capacity shotguns, short-barreled rifles, and multi-caliber guns. He uses explosives like M67 grenades, M18A1 Claymore mines, 40mm high-explosive rounds, and anti-tank rockets. For knives and stuff, you see him using trench knives and stilettos. During his early Vietnam-era comic origin, we saw his iconic array of guns like the Hog, aka the M60 machine gun, and the M16A1. In later stories, he also used M4A1 platforms. Apart from this, he made his own guns like pairing twin Colt M1911A1 45 ACPs with custom extended magazine wells and threaded barrels. Sometimes when he wears his massive skull logo on his chest, you see an array of gun magazines arranged to resemble the teeth of the skull. His technical operative Linus Lieberman, aka Microchip, whom he met in The Punisher Volume 2 Issue Number 4, is the one who supplies him with weapons and other necessary items like the battle van with radar jammers, hidden weapons, and computer systems for hacking. In the Netflix adaptation, however, we saw an even cooler and more upgraded version of this arsenal, which contained the long-range Barrett MRAD and Remington 700, Heckler and Koch MP5 variants, and Sig Sauer MPX platforms for silent attacks. So yeah, the man is a walking cabinet full of hidden weapons, which makes him the toughest guy in the room. What's going on inside his head? So if you have any misconceptions about Frank-Castle's mental health and think the guy is totally insane and clinically ill for killing so many people, let me correct that. The most amazing thing about the Punisher is that he knows exactly what he's doing, and he still does it anyway. No amount of psychoanalysis or court trials has been able to convince him that he's delusional or that he hears voices or something. He rejects all these ideas, clearly stating that he knows the illegality of his kind of vigilantism. The other superheroes of Marvel like Spider-Man and Daredevil have moral codes against killing, but this is where the Punisher goes against them. He thinks capturing a criminal and handing them over to the police eventually provides no solution. However, the death of his family surely disturbed him and made grief and pain his only personality. No matter how many murders he commits, the traumatic wound in his mind just never heals. The war goes on constantly inside his head, as it will only stop when he dies. But comic books said otherwise. In the What If storyline, Frank's family survives the Central Park attack, but he later becomes a vigilante after corruption and violence again devastate his life. Well, the man has vulnerabilities even though he's strong and quite unbeatable for a human superhero. His greatest vulnerabilities are his mental conflict and his distrust. In his debut comic, The Amazing Spider-Man number 129, he was manipulated by the Jackal into thinking that Spider-Man was a criminal. Then, in the Secret Empire storyline, he was once again manipulated by Hydra, who exploited his devotion to Captain America and encouraged him to commit more killings, making him think that it was the most righteous form of punishment. How different is Franken-Castle from screen to screen? By now, The Punisher has had 3 solo movies and 1 major live-action television adaptation, each with different actors and different aesthetics. So let's see how these screen adaptations differ from each other. Back in the 80s, Dolph Lundgren played the iconic character in the 1989 movie The Punisher, but it looked more like a darker adaptation of Death Wish. This was mainly because Dolph's Franken-Castle didn't wear any skull logo in the movie, making it look just like a gritty B-movie crime thriller of the 80s. Next, in 2004, another Punisher movie arrived, but this time, Thomas Jane played a covert FBI agent who turned into a vigilante after his family was killed. Here you can see the logo coming back, but not in the original comic-accurate way. Frank's son had gifted him a t-shirt with this logo, which became an emotional thing for him as well as a symbol of his family's death. The movie is very different from what the comic books suggested. You can find John Travolta playing Howard Saint, the man responsible for his family's death. So after the 2004 version portrayed a sympathetic Franken-Castle, the 2008 movie Punisher Warzone came out with the most brutal and gore-fest presentation of Frank's story, drawing heavily from Garth Ennis-era Punisher comics. Played by Ray Stevenson, the film was more like a splatterpunk thriller and a late 2000s mixed genre assignment that just didn't impress the core fandom. Finally, Jon Bernthal's Punisher appeared for the first time in Season 2 of Daredevil, and soon after, in 2017, he got his own Netflix show, a psychological thriller series that deeply dissects the character of Franken-Castle. It is the most grounded presentation of Frank's character I've seen so far, where the iconic white skull returned in its full form. However, the way he received this logo was changed from the canon. The series includes a brutal prison killing scene in which a deceased inmate's bloody face leaves a skull-like imprint on his shirt, visually foreshadowing the logo. Later, Frank spray paints the skull using an X-ray of his own skull as inspiration. Wait, the Punisher actually became a literal angel? After years of treating Frank as a human with no powers, writers suddenly thought of giving him glowing eyes and a demonic force. Christopher Golden and Thomas E. Snigoski made The Punisher Purgatory, a 4-issue comic miniseries where Frank is tormented by a demon named Olivier, who had lived as the mobster Frank Costa, Bruno Costa's brother. After the torment became unbearable, Frank killed himself, so his guardian angel, Gadriel, who had previously failed to protect his family during the massacre, came to his aid. He resurrected Frank and gave him supernatural powers and magical guns. This allowed him to chase actual demons of purgatory rather than gangsters and mafias. But the main problem is that fans of The Punisher absolutely hated the comic series, as all they wanted was the real, original Franken-Castle, a human who relies on real guns and skills, not demonic or angelic forces. So, to correct the mistake, Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon took over the 2000 comic series and brought Frank back through a new storyline to keep him as grounded and original as we've always seen him. What was the Bloodstone actually doing to Franken-Castle? During the Dark Reign storyline, explored in Dark Reign the List Punisher number 1, the Punisher number 11 through 16, and the Franken-Castle series, Frank was butchered into pieces by Wolverine's son, Daken. The Legion of Monsters and their leader, Morbius, resurrected him by assembling his severed body parts and patching him into a new form of Franken-Castle. Later, after another fight with Daken left him badly damaged, Morbius gave him a fragment of the ancient Bloodstone. The artifact granted him regenerative and mystical powers, healing his wounds and gradually restoring his human body. But the Bloodstone also amplified his rage and threatened to corrupt his judgment. When Elsa Bloodstone came to retrieve it, the Legion of Monsters convinced Frank that relying on it could make him lose the ability to distinguish innocent people from future threats. So Frank decided against keeping it. After a violent confrontation with Elsa, he ripped the Bloodstone from his own chest and handed it over, knowing very well that it would cause immense pain. By then, the Bloodstone had already done its work and restored him to normal human form. How did a gun-only vigilante end up leading a demon cult? In The Punisher Volume 13, Franken-Castle associated himself with the mystical ninja clan called the Hand. Well, it wasn't a voluntary move on Frank's part, but a trickier one. The Hand offered him something extremely precious to him, his dead wife, Maria, resurrected. So Frank agreed just to keep his wife alive. The Hand gave him demonic powers, turning him into the Fist of the Beast, the High Slayer chosen by the demonic Kralak. But the transformation didn't happen randomly like magic. Rather, there were 5 stages to this whole evolution. These 5 stages included 5 special powers gifted by the demon. These were the Eyes of the Beast, which helped Frank scan a person to check the crimes they had committed in the past and the crimes they would commit in the future. The Fire of the Beast is the demonic power that he can channel into his weapons to strike down powerful enemies like Lord Deathstrike. The Marrow of the Beast simply means superhuman strength and endurance in his body, allowing him to fight godlike beings. The Flight of the Beast helps him levitate, and lastly, the Will of the Beast is a spiritual awakening within Frank-Castle that allows him to fully become a demonically powered entity. Now, the most conflicting thing about this miniseries is that Frank actually embraced these corrupted gifts for the first time, thinking they would help him kill his enemies more quickly and easily. But most importantly, Maria's resurrection worked as his main motivation to absorb this demonic influence after all. Punisher, Sorcerer Supreme? How does that even work? So first things first, the story I'm about to share is not from the original Marvel continuity. It's a totally different alternate timeline, introduced in Secret Wars Battle World No. 1 in a story written by Joshua Williamson and illustrated by Mike Henderson. In this Battle World reality, Doctor Strange's body is destroyed by vampires, but his spirit roams around in astral form, looking for a host to possess. Strange forcefully possesses Frank-Castle's body, and together they merge into one. We see Frank in his iconic combat-ready suit and skull vest, but he's wrapped in the Cloak of Levitation, with the Eye of Agamotto hanging over his skull logo. Now, this crossover of the Sorcerer Supreme and Frank-Castle has to confront a bounty-hunting group called the Infernal Four, consisting of Spider-Man, Wolverine, Hulk, and Ghost Rider. So a battle begins, but Frank uses Strange's magical powers to subdue them one by one. He uses a spell called Calm to calm down Hulk and turn him back into Bruce Banner, and then uses dust to physically destroy him. However, in the end, Wolverine stabs him in the chest. While dying, the sorcerer within him begs Frank to cast a healing spell, but instead, Frank decides to blow himself up with a magical grenade. Although it is only Frank who dies, Strange gets out of his body and hops into Wolverine to continue his life cycle. How does the Punisher end up as a Ghost Rider? Once again, throw away your well-known Earth 616 universe and dive into the alternate timeline, commonly cataloged as Earth TRN 666, explored in the Thanos Win storyline by writer Donny Cates and artist Jeff Shaw. It began in the Thanos run published in 2017, where Thanos invades Earth and kills all the heroes one after another. During Thanos' invasion, Frank-Castle dies beneath the rubble of a building. As he faces death, his soul travels to Hell and makes a deal with Mephisto. Frank wants to kill Thanos at any cost, so he sells his soul to the Demon King Mephisto and takes the mantle of this world's Spirit of Vengeance. But when he finally comes back to Earth, everything is finished by then. Thanos has already left and there isn't a single human life left on the planet. Now, having no purpose at all, Frank-Castle, as the lonely Ghost Rider, roams Earth alone for centuries. Even Mephisto ignores his calls, so a helpless, friendless Ghost Rider remains alone in a perished world, with his mind constantly being fractured by the biting isolation. Then Galactus gave him cosmic powers on top of that? This is the wildest moment of this entire run, when on this dead and lonely planet, a badly wounded Galactus appears as the only way out for Frank-Castle. Galactus, after finding out that Reed Richards was dead and that there was no one alive in the barren land except for the flame-skulled Ghost Rider, bestowed the power cosmic on Frank-Castle, making him the Cosmic Ghost Rider and his herald so they could kill Thanos. Now, Cosmic Ghost Rider has all those abilities, like the Hellfire Chain, Penance Stare, and his iconic Skullfire, but all enhanced by the power cosmic. This means he can travel through space, manipulate cosmic energies, and fly at tremendous speeds. Later, after Odin allowed him to travel to the time of his choosing, he went back in time and decided to kill the infant Thanos to put an end to his evil before it began. But he failed to do so. Looking into the baby's eyes, he couldn't bring himself to kill an innocent child, so he adopted the baby, who later went on to become an even more dangerous form of Thanos. Cosmic Ghost Rider is considered one of the wildest comic crossovers from Marvel, but honestly, the storyline suffers in many instances because underneath a single appearance, there are two different personalities that are meant to be in conflict with each other. However, the comics don't explore that psychological nuance very carefully. Rather, the entire comic is filled with absurd humor that doesn't really connect with Frank-Castle's demeanor. I personally liked the crazy crossover of this story, but as a Frank-Castle comic, this wouldn't make it into my top 10 Punisher comic series. Well, that's it guys. From Frank as the merciless crusader to an alternate timeline's cosmic ghost rider, I've covered it all in this video. So if you enjoyed the discussion, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, let us know what you like most about Frank-Castle in the latest film, Spider-Man Brand New Day. Until then, goodbye and see you in the next one.